Evermore Mansion didn't feel like a home. It felt like a kingdom, perched high on its private hill overlooking the city. The wrought iron gates gilded in gold, open to a different world. Towering cedar trees aligned like soldiers, a koi pond perfectly round as if carved from the sky, and a black stone walkway leading straight, unwavering like a path to a throne. And in the heart of that power, inside a vast study paneled with rosewood and stained glass, a black woman moved silently, dusting the bookshelves. Her name was Amira Benson. She was in her early 30s, tall and poised, her dark brown skin gleaming like polished ebony. Her hair was always pulled into a neat bun, her presence quiet enough to disappear into the background. Amira was the only maid allowed in Wendell Carraway's private study, not because he trusted her, but because she was invisible. She didn't ask questions, didn't leave traces, didn't even glance too long at the documents marked confidential. To him, she was the perfect shadow, and maybe that's why no one ever thought to pay attention to her. That morning, sunlight spilled like liquid gold across the glass walls, reflecting off the polished wood. Amira stretched to dust the highest shelf, her fingers brushing a gap between two heavy volumes. Wait a second. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us. Something slipped. A letter, yellowed, thick like parchment, edges frayed, fell soundlessly, spiraling through the air before settling on the rug. Amira bent down, gently lifting it. The faded red wax seal bore an ancient crest. The ink inside was careful, deliberate, written in classical Latin. Her eyes narrowed slightly, tracing each letter with the focus of someone who had once studied this language, not as a hobby, but as a scholar. And then the study door swung open. Wendell Carraway stepped in. The real estate tycoon, now in his 50s, was dressed like his wealth. A perfectly pressed white shirt, cufflinks gleaming silver, hair swept back, gaze sharp and assessing like he was pricing everything he saw. He froze for half a second when he spotted the letter in her hands. Then his face curved into that smug, condescending smile. "Oh? You can read?" Amira said nothing, standing calmly. "Latin, no less." Wendell's laugh filled the room. "Tell you what, if you can translate that, my entire year's salary is yours." His smile turned cruel. "Oh wait, I forgot. Your kind can't even read properly, let alone Latin." Her lips pressed together, just slightly. But she didn't look down. Instead, Amira lifted her gaze to the paper, her voice smooth, low, and unnervingly precise. She spoke. The words rolled out in flawless classical Latin, clear and measured, like an inscription read by a priestess at a Roman altar. The room went still. Wendell blinked. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his pale eyes. Shock, maybe even fear. Then he snapped. He yanked the letter from her hand as if it burned him.
"Who do you think you are?" he barked. "Going through my private papers? Making things up for money? You think spouting gibberish will fool me?"
Amira didn't move. This time she didn't lower her head either. Her dark eyes, deep and unyielding, like obsidian, held his. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't need to, because both of them knew what had just happened. This wasn't just a letter. It was a key to something Wendell had buried under millions of dollars. Airtight contracts and carefully constructed lies. And now, that key had fallen into the hands of the one person he never noticed. In that quiet moment, Wendell Carraway had no idea that his empire had just cracked. And Amira Benson, standing still and calm, wasn't running from the storm that was coming. She was waiting for it. Evermore Mansion remained untouched by the chaos it had sown. Inside its marble halls, Wendell Carraway still walked like a king, his empire gleaming brighter than ever. But far from those gold-lined walls, a woman he thought erased from existence was quietly cavering her strength. The morning after Wendell had ordered her removal, Amira Benson stood in the staff washroom, rinsing dust from her hands when the door burst open. The sharp click of polished leather shoes echoed across the tiled floor. Reginald Claymore, the head butler, entered. A man past 50, with a spine straight as a drawn sword and a face carved from stone, delivered his words as if announcing a death sentence. "Mr. Carraway requests that you leave the estate today." Amira looked up, her eyes calm, unreadable. "For reading Latin, for violating his private correspondence," Reginald replied, his voice flat. "I didn't violate anything. A letter fell while I was cleaning. He asked me to read it. And yes, I can read Latin. I studied it before." But Reginald said nothing more. He simply gestured, and two staff members, Mason and Darlene, stepped in. They packed her belongings with no more care than clearing trash: an old wristwatch, leather notebooks, and a faded photograph of her mother, all shoved into a cheap cloth bag. Mason tossed it at her feet at the garden gate. "Your things." Darlene smirked, whispering just loud enough for Amira to hear. She really thought knowing Latin would make her special. Forgot she's just the maid in an apron. Reginald turned away, but for a fraction of a second, just a flicker, his gaze wavered. There was something there. Guilt? Doubt? But it passed, replaced by the same dutiful mask. The gates of Evermore closed behind her with a hiss of steel. Amira stood in the sunlight, picked up the bag without a word, brushed dirt from her old notebook, and walked away. Not once did she lower her head. By evening, the first headlines appeared. Millionaire Wendell Carraway fires Black Maid for peeking at confidential investment documents. Within hours, the narrative mutated. Amira wasn't just a fired maid. She was painted as a would-be spy, scheming to use stolen information to climb out of poverty. When she returned to her boarding house, the air was heavy with stares. People, white and black alike, looked at her as though she carried a disease. The landlady, Clarissa Vaughn, came out with a lit cigarette trembling between her fingers. "I don't house criminals. I haven't done anything wrong. The news doesn't lie, sweetheart. Get out." No one defended her. Someone even spat on the sidewalk as she dragged her bag past. In the following days, Amira went door to door searching for work. Bookstores, gas stations, coffee shops, even a community center. Every time, the response was the same: tight smiles, polite refusals. "We're doing strict background checks now. I'm sorry, but it's not a good time for us to hire." 1 week later, her suitcase tore at the seams. Her soft-soled shoes were soaked after a night spent under an awning during heavy rain. Her credit card was frozen due to suspicious tapping. With no options left, Amira boarded a bus back to her hometown, a small wooden house nestled between two old maple trees, where her mother, Clarice Benson, lived. Clarice, partially blind after a textile factory accident years ago, sat on the edge of her bed when Amira arrived. A folded newspaper lay across her lap, her frail fingers tracing the printed words as if she could feel their meaning. "Is it true, Amira?" Her voice cracked. "They say you were a spy." Amira knelt, taking her mother's cold hands. "No, Mama. They lied. But they'll pay. Every single one of them. I have a way." Clarice didn't ask how. She just squeezed her daughter's hands tightly, as if pouring the last of her strength into her. In the weeks that followed, Amira lived like a ghost in her own town, staying inside during daylight hours, hiding from curious eyes and whispering pity. She, once a celebrated scholar invited to intercollegiate Latin research forums, was now a pariah. Meanwhile, Wendell Carraway flourished. His face filled magazine covers, smiling at charity galas and sealing new international deals. The scandal of a maid was buried under headlines of wealth and influence. To him, Amira Benson was just a dried leaf brushed off his immaculate suit. But beneath the soil of forgotten truths, a seed had taken root. And one day, that seed would grow, not to bloom, but to pierce through the empire Wendell had built on lies. Amira did not remain silent and hide because of fear. It wasn't weakness, nor was it surrendering to the labels forced upon her. She simply knew it wasn't the right time yet. What she needed wasn't pity or a few defensive comments on social media. What she needed was proof. Proof strong enough to tear open a massive lie. The Latin letter she had read that day was the key to everything. But it was only a copy, blurred, incomplete, without signatures or legal seals. She knew exactly what she needed, the original, and that wasn't in Wendell Carraway's hands. It was kept at the city archive. The archives were a place Amira had once called home. Back when she was a linguistics student, she had spent countless hours in that cold, quiet room, poring over old manuscripts, peeling back the layers of time one dusty page at a time. She loved the smell of old paper, the sacred silence of knowledge resting in cardboard folders. She had once dreamed of staying there forever. But life doesn't let anyone hold on to dreams forever. She had left that place to work as a maid in Wendell's mansion, because her mother needed medicine and the house needed more money. Now, ironically, that very place was her only path back to the light. Accessing the archives, however, was no simple task. It required official requests, legitimate research reasons, letters of endorsement. Worse, if the name Amira Benson surfaced tainted by the recent scandal, the doors of the archives would slam shut for good. So she moved like a ghost, slipping back into the place she once knew. 3 weeks later, in a thin coat and a baseball cap pulled low, Amira stood at the reception desk, holding forged research paperwork. Behind the counter stood Tasha Green, an old friend from her student days, now a full-time archivist. Tasha stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, she gave a small nod. "Follow me." They moved quietly through a long hallway, descending into storage room 2, where old land records and unsorted Latin documents were kept. Amira sat in a private reading room. Tasha placed a heavy box in front of her, dust spilling off like fine ash. "You have 2 hours. Be quick." The door shut behind her. Amira's hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the files. Her eyes scanned every faded ink mark, every legal notation, till her fingers touched a rolled parchment sealed with a faded red wax stamp, shaped like a blooming lotus, the symbol of the first African community to settle in the city. She unrolled it, and her heart raced as her eyes fell on the words, clear, undeniable, written in ancient Latin, the same words she had seen at Wendell's mansion. "This land is a gift to the descendants of the African community, and shall remain theirs forever. No one has the right to take it away." Below it was the signature of Father Josiah Carter, head of the missionary board during the colonial era, and the official court seal dated 1937. Beside it lay the original map of the jetted property, the very land Wendell planned to auction for his luxury project. This meant one thing: that land legally belonged to the black community, and any transaction excluding them was illegal. Amira carefully folded the document, snapped photos, and took detailed notes. She knew the time to strike back had come. A week later, Wendell Carraway stood proudly at a 5-star hotel press conference. Bathed in luxurious lights, he smiled broadly, waving the project contract in front of a massive LED screen. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to present Elysium Heights, a world-class smart city project, backed by top international investors. This will become the new symbol of our city's prosperity." The press cheered, and Carraway Realty's stock soared within 4 hours. He thought he had won. But at exactly 8:05 p.m., a 4-minute anonymous video appeared on social media, posted by an account named Veritas. The city held its breath. The video opened with scans of the original 1937 Latin document. It showed side-by-side comparisons of the deed map and the current city map. Then came an English translation, verified by 3 independent linguistics experts from 3 different universities. "This land is a gift to the descendants of the African community, and shall remain theirs forever. No one has the right to take it away." At the end, a calm, firm female voice spoke. Amira's voice. "I wasn't silent because I was afraid. I was silent because I needed the right time, and that time is now." The internet erupted. Hashtags, Land for Justice and Amira Benson trended across all platforms. News outlets raced with headlines. "Fired Black Maid. The only person who stopped the land grab of the century." Ancient document exposes high-class real estate fraud. Legal system faces its greatest challenge yet. Public opinion split, but the majority rallied behind Amira. The evidence was irrefutable. Experts confirmed the authenticity of the seals and papers. City Hall couldn't stay silent anymore. The next morning, the mayor's office released an urgent statement. We have received the full documentation and will conduct a thorough investigation into the historical ownership of the disputed land. All activities related to the Elysium Heights project are suspended until further notice. Wendell Carraway, who had once laughed in a maid's face for reading Latin, now sat pale and shaken in his penthouse, staring blankly at the news on TV. Meanwhile, in a small, modest home, miles away, Amira stood by her mother's window, autumn wind brushing through her loose curls. She held her old phone, which flashed a notification. Your video has reached 4.3 million. She set the phone down and turned to her mother, Clarice, blind in one eye, and took her hand gently. See, Mama, she said softly. They're listening. Clarice couldn't see, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. Less than 48 hours after the video was released, Carraway Realty's stock plummeted like a runaway car barreling down a steep hill. The market charts carved sharp red lines, signaling a financial quake. Wendell Carraway could no longer stop, despite his once arrogant claim that he could buy this entire city if I wanted to. Foreign investors panicked. Within a single afternoon, 2 major investment funds from Switzerland and Singapore withdrew, cutting all ties. The legal firm Jacobs & Brand issued a terse statement. We do not condone any actions that infringe upon community-owned property. All legal support for Carraway Realty is terminated effective immediately. The press began digging deeper. Questions surfaced. Was this the first time Carraway had seized public land? In just 3 days, investigative journalists unearthed his past real estate dealings. What they found shocked the city. 3 land disputes over the past decade, quietly buried under suspicious circumstances, shared the same pattern. Minority communities were coerced into selling land for pennies or accused of fabricated legal violations before their property was seized. All settlement agreements were kept confidential, sealed with strict non-disclosure clauses. 2 former witnesses came forward, confirming, we were threatened if we didn't sign away our land. Public outrage erupted. This time, no one could silence the truth. The mayor's office, under immense pressure from the public and human rights organizations, issued an emergency order. All operations related to the Elysium Heights project are temporarily suspended. A special investigation into the legality of all Carraway Realty properties has been launched. The following week, an unprecedented public hearing was held at City Hall, with a former maid as the key witness. Amira entered the grand chamber wearing a crisp white blouse and a deep blue skirt. Her tightly tied curls framed a face of calm determination. Her dark eyes were steady, unflinching, as solid as stone. The officials listened intently as she presented photographs of the original 1937 Latin document bearing the official seal, certified translations, verified by 3 independent linguistic experts, legal history of the disputed land, including post-colonial ownership maps, archived records perfectly matching Amira's testimony. No one interrupted. Silence hung in the chamber. A spectator quietly wept when Amira spoke. I used to scrub his floors. Now I scrub the dust off the truth. Wendell Carraway, summoned to testify, sat gaunt and hollow-eyed. For the first time in his life, he couldn't bribe, threaten, or manipulate. Before justice, he was nothing but a liar with ink-stained hands. By the end of the hearing, the court announced Wendell Carraway would be prosecuted for unlawful seizure of public land and falsification of legal records. His assets would be frozen, with a portion seized to compensate affected communities. The Elysium Heights project was officially canceled. The disputed land, once envisioned as a luxury smart city, was restored to the African Descendant Community Council. As stated in the original request, a small memorial was built in the center of the land, engraved in both English and Latin. This land is a gift to the descendants of Africa. No one has the right to take it away. Amira became a quiet symbol of upheaval. She received dozens of invitations from universities, human rights organizations, and international conferences, asking her to speak, to consult, to inspire. The press called her the Latin warrior, but she declined them all. She accepted only one invitation: to teach. She opened a free community class, teaching children and young adults, especially those from marginalized backgrounds, how to read, translate, and preserve historical documents. In a modest yellow-painted room surrounded by bookshelves and chalkboards, Amira guided students through the art of translating ancient Latin, teaching them how to trace history through fragile paper fibers. One sunny afternoon, Amira and her mother, Clarice, moved into a small new house. It wasn't grand, but it was warm and peaceful. Flowers bloomed in the garden. Books lined the shelves. And there was hope. Clarice sat by the window, her voice frail but glowing. "I never learned to read, so I stayed silent all my life. But you made the whole world listen." Amira sat beside her, smiling softly. "I just spoke at the right time, Mama, and in the right way." Outside, the late-season breeze whispered through the bougainvillea. The land once priced in millions was now restored with something far greater: honor, knowledge, and dreams that no amount of money could tool. Beneath layers of time and prejudice, some truths continue to shine quietly. Amira, once dismissed as insignificant because of her skin color and her job, proved that intelligence, courage, and justice have no class or boundary. She didn't reclaim her dignity with loud words, but with silent, precise actions, sharp as a blade cutting through lies. In a world quick to overlook the powerless, she forced society to stop and listen, not just to demand justice for herself, but to carve a path for future generations, with knowledge, with faith, and with a patience that nothing could extinguish.